Every single invitation to this event has been declined.
What? Let me take a look at this. Are you joking me? Hold on. Barack Obama said no? Lady Gaga said no? Oprah Winfrey said no? Oh my God, Macklemore said no!
If you're a high school junior, senior, or someone who's going to be applying to college in the next few years, like me, I'm applying in 2026. No, that's such a big fat lie. I'm applying in 2025. Chances are you've seen the many college decision reaction videos all over YouTube. People scream and they do their big reactions when they finally get accepted to their dream school or dream schools. Whether it's Ivy Leagues, T10s, T20s, T50s, majority of the people who post these videos have their acceptances from many highly selective schools and state schools as well. And when they tell you their ECs and read you their essay, in previous years, their achievements felt accessible, you know? Like when I used to watch a video and let's say not the most recent ones that came out, but the year before, so like 2024 decision reactions, I'd see the stats and I'd be like, oh, okay, that feels reachable. That feels like a normal person. You know, if you worked hard and you got the high GPA, the good AP scores or the good grades all round and the 1500 SAT or above, you would get into the school you applied for. You know, you would get into the Ivy, you'd get into the highly selective school. But in 2025, something changed. And I don't know about you guys, but all the videos I was seeing were people who should have got in and people who would have got in the year before, but they just weren't getting in. R/ATC was full of super high achieving students. Like you'd read their stats and think, what the hell? Like, how am I going to compare to these people? And they weren't getting in. They were getting rejected from their match schools. You know, the videos, so many less screams than they used to have in them. Like people used to be screaming in those videos and you get like one acceptance in them now because people just aren't getting into as many schools as before. So in this video, I really want to break down why that happened. Like, why is a 1500 no longer enough to set you apart from everyone else? Why was 2025 such a difficult year for students who were applying? And is 2026 going to be as difficult? Because I'm really scared, guys. When I first started to look into like the US admissions process, I was really shocked because everywhere you look, it just says holistic everywhere. What does this actually mean? Like, it's such a big difference from UK unis because in UK unis, your grades matter the most. They're the first thing that admissions officers look at and they're the thing that matters. Like extracurriculars and clubs, you can feature them in your personal statement, but it's not part of the requirements. You know what I mean? But in the US, you really have to sell yourself to the AO. Like you have to convince them that you're an asset and the school needs you. It's just not the same in the UK. AOs look at things like your extracurriculars in the context of your location. They look at your essays. You know, you get to showcase who you are and what sets you apart. They take into consideration so much financial information compared to the UK. Like it gets so specific. And things like Questbridge are really helpful in helping lower income students get a pathway to a T50 score. Whereas in the UK, your A-level predicted grades, so not even your actual grades, the grades you get at the end of year 12, so when you're 17, unis usually require 3 A-level grades. They must meet the requirements. You know, you can apply if they're a little bit lower, but you want them to meet the requirements ideally. And highly specialized courses also require GCSE grades. So a business course, for example, you need a 6 in maths, which is like a B or higher. And banking, you need a 7 or higher, which is an A or higher, because like you need maths for finance, obviously. STEM courses also require 1 or 2 of your A-level grades to be a science subject, and they look at your GCSE grades as well. So all of the grades matter. People who say your GCSE grades don't matter are such liars. And then after all of these grade boundaries and numbers that you just have to tick those boxes, then they look at your personal statement. And it's actually changing this year. It's split into 3 questions, kind of more like the American system. It's what course you're interested in, what have your studies contributed to your interest in the course, and how do your supercurriculars, so things you've done outside of school, contribute to that. I kind of have an issue with this because I wanted to apply to 2 completely different sectors. I was looking at business and like accounting and tax, and then nursing, which obviously have nothing to do with each other, but you get to write one personal statement, so it kind of looks not very cohesive if I'm applying to both of them, so I really don't know what I'm going to do about that. Unis usually expect you to apply to similar courses. You get 5 options. UCAS allows you to apply to 5, whereas with Common App, you can apply to as many colleges as you want, but you can do 6. There's like a UCAS extra option, which is kind of annoying. I wish it was like 7, because I just feel like 5 isn't enough if you want to have matches, reaches, and safeties. The reason they expect you to do similar courses for your personal statement is because you start specializing specializing at 16. So when you choose your GCSE classes, you make it more specific. So you might choose history or geography, or maybe you might do both, I don't know. But you choose what language you want to do, you choose what humanity, and then when you go into A-level, you slim it down further, which I actually don't like. So it's a lot less contextual to the US. They don't really look at your whole education context. They're looking at GCSE, A-level, do you meet the grades, full stop. So overall, in the UK, if you meet the requirements, you're most likely going to get accepted, unless it's highly selective like Oxbridge, which is basically the Ivies in the UK, or if it's a highly oversubscribed course like business, like medicine, like dentistry, like pharmacology, like optometry. But in the US, it's just not like that anymore. Like, you could have a 1570 and you wouldn't get in if you don't have good ECs or amazing essays. And if you're an international student, it makes it so much harder as well. College applicants in 2025 were mostly 2007 born, and in 2007 there was the massive baby boom right before the recession in 2008, and 4.3 million births were recorded in the US. So just imagine that. Let's assume there's 3 million applying. That's 3 million applicants for colleges, and there's not that many colleges. It made college admissions even more highly selective than they were before, and this was a really big point of complaint in r/A2C. So many people were getting the right grades, but they just weren't being picked. And while the baby boom definitely contributes to this, I do think there's another issue at play. You know, when you look for a job, in most cases, they require a bachelor's degree. Like, it's normal to get an undergraduate. But back in the day, when it was still more expensive and rare for individuals to go to college, having a bachelor's degree basically guaranteed you the job because it sets you apart. If there were 100 people in a room, 5 people would have a bachelor's degree, and those would be the people who got hired. It was just easy. You just picked the people with the degree. But when college degrees became more accessible to the middle class, it kind of switched. It became normal to go to college. That was just the route that you took. Whereas before, it was normal to go and learn a trade or work in a factory, and it was rare to go to college. It was now normal to go to college and rare to choose a trade. So that's why now a lot of highly technical jobs, like STEM jobs, require a master's and or experience as well. So there's just another benchmark you need to hit. They're just going to keep adding them, because when something becomes available to the masses, it stops being exclusive and valuable. Now, since a lot more people were applying to colleges didn't just let anyone in. You know, before, if there were 1,000 applicants a year, they could let those 1,000 applicants a year in. They had the money, they didn't have any more applicants, okay. But now there's too many people applying for the number of spaces. So how do you decide who gets let in? In comes selectiveness. The SAT was introduced in 1926 by Carl Brigham as a way to cull applicants and only admit the smartest ones. And this created acceptance rates. But the thing with this is, everyone gets really good at the test because they're standardized. So schools have way too many people with the right SAT score, with a 1500 or above. But with everyone doing the same test every year, people just get good at taking the test and not learning. So if you have too many people with the same SAT score that technically meets your boundaries, you have to have another way to compare them. And this is where holistic admissions comes in. Extracurriculars and essays now played a really big role in admission. So basically, the cooler and smarter you were, the more likely you were to get in. And this brings us to now, an era where only highly selective schools have reinstated, you know, the test optional status brought in during COVID, and people who should have got in 2025 by normal standards just weren't, because they weren't interesting enough, or they were overqualified, or they weren't a right match. Why is a 1500 no longer as impressive to colleges anymore? Well, there's a crucial problem with standardized testing. It's standardized. It's essentially testing the same fundamental principles each round, and with there only being so many ways to ask a question and a set curriculum, learning how to sit the test rather than how to answer the questions has become normal. But with this comes a caveat. State schools just can't offer the same level of teaching as private schools, and this isn't because state schools have worse teachers, but the student to faculty ratio really makes a difference in this case. Students who attend a private school are statistically more likely to perform better on standardized tests. The resources and connections that wealthy people can provide for their children are just unparalleled by anything a state school attending person can. A lot of high schools won't be able to offer AP classes, and it's mostly only private schools teaching IB for international students, which is the benchmark for international admissions. There's always information about IB, but rarely ever information about A-levels, which is the most commonly taken test, but they choose to put the private school test instead of the one taken by the masses. So while admissions officers might say, oh, it's contextual, you know, we look at what your high school can offer, it never never really is contextual, because having APs is always going to put someone else at an advantage, even if it's not inherently putting you at a disadvantage. The wealthy are so much better set up to meet these college admission requirements. It's almost like the college admission requirements favor the rich. Crazy. However, with this, I think being wealthy and rich are two different things, and I wanted to kind of break them down because I think it makes a difference. So I recently went to the American school in London for a quiz bowl with my school, and it was genuinely such an incredible experience. Just Google St. John's Wood house prices and you'll be able to see the types of houses these people are living in. Like, these kids are wealthy, you know, there are security details at the front of the school, there's a swimming pool, there's a massive underground library called the Melon Library. Yes, that melon. It's beautifully designed. You could really tell that the students were getting the best of the best. Like, it really made me envious, not of their wealth, but just of their experience, you know? And you'd think that this would make them stuck up, but they were actually really down to earth. I think this is because of the key difference between wealthiness and richness. These are wealthy people, you know? They're wealthy in opportunity and experience and resources. They have every opportunity within arm's reach. They're high achievers and they're rewarded for this, you know? Their learning environment is so much more conducive to productivity than any of the classrooms I've ever been in. And you could really feel the difference. I was there for a day, guys, and it was life-changing. And I never thought I would want my children to go to a private school. This is a big debate in the UK because private school, there is this, you know, stereotype of Tories who go to private school and they're just so unrelatable, and, you know, they don't feel like real people because they've had such a sheltered, wealthy experience, essentially. But this school was so different, I would consider sending my future children there. Like, I love school, I love going to school every day, but this school just puts it into a complete different perspective. Like, if I went to this school, I would never shut up, genuinely. They have every door open and they can do whatever classes they want, and they can have these super unique extracurriculars that I'll never be able to do. How I see it is, where rich shouts, wealth whispers. Wealthy people are wealthy in every way, so their children will also be interacting with people as wealthy as them. So they'll be able to do super specific sports. So these wealthy children can have as many weird and wacky things on their application as possible. You know, they might have internships with their friend's parents' company, which is probably Fortune 500, and they're more likely to do things like fencing, archery, horse riding, chess championships. I actually did do a chess championship, to be fair, but I did one. Actually, no, I did two. Niche sports like wakeboarding, rowing, you know, things like Olympiads in STEM and national level scholastic opportunities, while state school people are left with the sports that anyone can do, like football, netball, basketball, tennis. And that's why football is the most famous sport in the world. Like, anyone can do it. It's so universal. It doesn't require all the expensive equipment and training and coaching like a lot of the other more niche sports do. The downside to it being so universal is that everyone's doing it. So saying I went to a football club every week for 5 years doesn't make you that unique, because the chances are every other person who's applying also has. So you're competing with these extracurriculars that make other people sound super interesting and you, by comparison, average. So you're at more of a disadvantage there too. Because of the sheer amount of Henrys, high earners but not rich yet, in the middle class, the gap between lower middle class and upper middle class is just so massive that you will never be able to compete. To be a lower middle class person, you might have a high income, but because of tax, you don't actually see that much of that high income. And there's so many people stuck in that same situation that the middle class is just so massive that if you imagine it on a line, like a number line, the people on the left are lower middle class and the people on the right are upper middle class. There's such a vast majority of the population sits in that space that then everyone in the upper class is so far away from you that that gap is filled with people who are so much better than you. Like, you can't compete with these niche sports and these people's fucking extracurricular lists. Who's doing fencing? Who's middle class? Or maybe they go to, I don't know, maybe they live by Lake Michigan and I don't know anything about Lake Michigan. They go and they row there every year. Or maybe these people that I met at the American School in London, maybe their parents, maybe they have a holiday home in some exotic country, and when they're over there, they learn how to sail. Or they learn some niche sport, like maybe they go to Southeast Asia every year and they learn a martial arts. You've scored well, you've got brilliant essays that don't start with I hate the letter S and that don't end with it was all a dream. You've got a stacked list of extracurriculars that demonstrated your commitment to the community and your personal development. You send off your application and you get them back, only to be rejected by all your highly selective schools. Why? You're just not unique enough. With the wealth gap continuing to widen, it's no secret that college admissions will become more and more competitive. Your ECs will never compare to those of a private school student, and your SAT scores are statistically less likely to be a 90th percentile or above unless you have that low faculty to student ratio that comes with a private school education. Holistic admissions can't really help you now. It's all a game of luck. I think the most important takeaway from this year's admissions, especially if you're anything like me and academic validation fuels you, it's important to keep in mind that wherever you end up, you'll end up in the right place. And even though the rejection is only redirection thing might just feel like bullshit to make yourself feel better, it's not too far off a pretty reasonable mindset. Now, while unfortunately your income might be defined by the college you go to, your worth isn't. I know it's super cheesy, but it's true. This problem happens with Oxbridge as well. It's not just a US issue. It doesn't really matter what degree you do if you go to an Ivy or an Oxbridge school. If you have that school in your CV, nothing else matters. But really, I think it's your experiences that add most to what you offer. So Ivy's being out of reach isn't the end of the world, even if it feels like it's the end of your world. Hopefully 2026 is more forgiving and we see more people getting in, fingers crossed, because that's going to be the year I'm applying. I hope you guys found this video interesting. Let me know what you think about college admissions down below. Any words of wisdom for people applying in the coming years? If you think that the college/uni that you went to makes a massive difference when applying to jobs, let's have a conversation down below. I hope you guys enjoyed and that you got into the college that you wanted to go to, or that you feel happy in the college that you got into now. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Bye.